Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. Mama Zara looked up from her nearly boiling cauldron as the bell above the shop door chimed, signaling a new arrival. "How am I supposed to get to the toil and trouble part if the potion won't even boil?" she grumbled, addressing the ceiling as if it held answers. The ceiling offered no response, remaining silent as Mama sighed and pushed herself off the stool. "All right, you. I'm not watching anymore. Just boil already, but don't mess up the carpet this time," she muttered, shaking her head. The cauldron burbled as if in reluctant acknowledgment but stayed stubbornly unboiled while Mama made her way to the curtain that separated her workspace from the shop. As she approached the counter, the cauldron finally began to bubble with anticipation. "Can I help you?" Mama asked, addressing the tall, strikingly beautiful young woman waiting at the counter. "Yes, I have a complaint about the spell you sold me," the woman replied. "Spell?" Mama squinted at the woman's aura, then smiled. "It seems to have worked quite well, Mr. Clark. You're absolutely radiant." "Oh, it worked all right," Sydney, formerly Justin, Clark, replied, her long, glossy black hair cascading gracefully. "I'm stunning, but there are some issues." "Really?" Mima raised an eyebrow, reflecting on the contrast between her own formidable magical skills and her rather unassuming appearance. Dealing with customers was often tricky, as they were more inclined to challenge a pretty young woman than an imposing figure. "You look quite magnificent, dear." "Yeah, well," Sydney said with a frown, tapping her foot in frustration. "Except for the part where I'm now a full-blown party girl." She reached into her leather purse and pulled out a plastic baggie filled with oversized hand-rolled cigarettes. "The spirits must have misunderstood. I woke up to find these all over my apartment, used-up joints with my lipstick on them." Mama nodded thoughtfully, offering a weak grin. "Want to smoke one now? Looks like the spirits gave you some good stuff." "Help yourself," Sydney said, holding out the baggie. "No matter how many I take, there's always at least 20 left. It's a never-ending stash." "Of course, it'll be tough to raise kids from behind bars," Sydney added. "Kids?" Mama raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I'll explain that part later," Sydney promised. "And you're surprised?" Mama asked, taking half of the joints from the bag and returning it with a bemused smile, noting that the number of joints had mysteriously replenished. "Do you have any idea how bad the munchies are?" Sydney complained. "Now that I've got this body, I need to maintain it," Sydney said. Then she sighed, putting the baggie back in her purse. "They do help me relax before work, which brings me to my second complaint." "Ah yes," Mama said, inhaling deeply from the joint, the smoke hitting her brain like a welcoming wave. "The job. You wanted something lucrative and prestigious, if I remember correctly." "That's right," Sydney said, wide-eyed as Mama took a substantial drag. "But I'm a stripper, or exotic dancer if we're being politically correct," Mama replied calmly, savoring the high from the joint and marveling at the spirit's gift. "The pay is excellent, tips are even better, and the audience always looks up to you on stage. Sure, the hours can be rough, but there are perks." "So what's the issue?" "I used to be a systems analyst." Sydney snapped in frustration. "Now I'm often too out of it to even hope my computer runs smoothly." "You were quite stressed when you came in," Mama observed. "Do you still feel stressed now? Wasn't that part of the deal? Anyone who could stay stressed with this stuff lying around would have to be having a heart attack during a top college football game and betting the house on the losing team," Sydney said, lighting another joint and giggling. "This stuff is amazing. Okay, so we've managed your stress, you have a good job despite the hours, and you exude appeal even without this fantastic weed," Mama said, ticking off points on one hand as she lit another joint. "What's left?" "I wanted a loving family and a good education with proof of it." "And?" Mama prompted. "I'm married to a great guy, good-looking, too, who can't keep his hands off me when I'm home." "Fine, so you've got a passionate husband." What's the issue with the family? Mike is so loving that we've already had 3 kids. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get any sleep with 3 children constantly running around yelling, "Mommy, Mommy," Sydney complained. Your family loves you and needs you, Mama shrugged with a grin. What more could you ask for? Not being so zonked out that my kids grow up resenting me would be nice. Okay, Sydney closed her eyes to steady herself. I'll give you that one, too. But this is too much. Mama took a look at the certificate Sydney had shoved under her nose and nodded. A perfectly legitimate certificate of completion with honors. From Betty's Beautician Boutique? Sydney nearly shouted. I had a master's in computer science, and now I have a diploma from some fly-by-night beauty school. Oh, no, Mama said with a dismissive wave. Betty's Beautician Boutique is one of the top beauty schools in the country. Betty's graduates cater to the rich and famous and are always in high demand. You've got a real opportunity there if you ever decide to leave exotic dancing. Does anyone ever win an argument with you? Sydney sighed and then grinned. Ever? My cauldron does all the time, Mama admitted with a grin. But that's the only one I can think of offhand. So glad you cleared that up, Sydney said, shaking her head, wincing as her 38 DDS exaggerated the motion. So, you did meet all the terms of our contract, right? Correct, dear, Mama said with a wide smile. That's why my guarantee is posted over the front door. Nothing can possibly go wrong, Sydney muttered wearily. So, I can't get a refund or have the spell reversed, right? No one said that, Mama replied, giving Sydney a calculating look. We could draft a new contract, you'd pay me again in cash, and I'd be happy to present your case to the spirits once more. Never mind, Sydney sighed. I think I'd better quit while I'm ahead. Wise choice, young lady, Mama agreed, then brightened. But remember, if you decide to try again. I know, Sydney giggled. Nothing can possibly go wrong. Absolutely. Mama called after her departing customer. Except for this blasted cauldron, Mama muttered, her foot squelching on wet carpet from the boiled-over potion. Making her way to the stove and the large pot that seemed to be mocking her, she threatened, you could be replaced, you know.